Many years ago, I was walking down an aisle in a grocery store when I looked up and saw right in front of me a person with such an extreme physical deformity that my instant reaction flew right past revulsion and straight into a moment of actual terror. It was a child sitting in a shopping cart with some kind of birth defect that made his face look like a demonic entity straight out of a Hollywood special effects department. His eyelids looked like they were peeled back, revealing raw, blood-red flesh. His jaw and mouth were misshapen into a kind of pointed beak with crooked teeth. His skull was deformed and mostly bald with random tufts of wispy hair. And when I saw this poor child, I startled and made a noise involuntarily. And it took me a long moment to compose myself and pretend like nothing had happened, but it was too late. The child and his mother had both noticed my reaction, and they turned away with, I think, a bit of a weary look on their faces. I've carried some shame around that reaction of mine ever since, and I cannot imagine what it must be like to view life from the eyes of that poor child, seeing fear and revulsion in other people's faces whenever they look at you. What a heartbreaking situation for the tender mind of a young child to experience. Today in meditation, I began experimenting with the internal family systems model of therapy, and I encountered an internal part of my own psyche whose appearance was similarly deformed. And I want to share what I learned with you. I should make it clear that my goal with meditation is not relaxation or mental clarity. I meditate because I want to reach enlightenment. I want to know what my true nature is beyond my physical body and mental beliefs and identity. And I've been on that path for a very long time now and have had many powerful glimpses of higher realities, but things haven't progressed as fast or as far as I would really like. Definitely not as fast as I expected when I was a teenager who left home to seek enlightenment in India under the guidance of a meditation master. If you are on a similar spiritual path, then this video is for you. And like me, you might feel some frustration around the feeling of being subtly delayed somehow in your pursuit of total self-knowledge, as if you're running a race through waist-deep syrup. I'm relatively new to the internal family systems, also called IFS, model of therapy, but I'm not new to parts work. I first noticed internal parts as if they were independent little personalities inside of me when I was a teenager, and since then I've worked with them in various ways, but it was really my beginning study of IFS several months ago that has brought greater clarity and effectiveness to my approach, and I suspect there is great promise in bringing this IFS approach to the path of enlightenment. I've just begun to explore this fusion of IFS into my long-standing inquiry into the nature of our greater awareness, and I've just had an interesting and powerful experience with it that I want to share with you. I began a meditation with a renewed sense of drive and purpose in seeing my true nature. Not just seeing, but immersing myself in it and experiencing it profoundly. The thought came to me, hey, it's my true nature, not someone else's, and it's already here, and yet for some reason I'm not experiencing it in its totality. There is no valid reason for that to be so. I refuse to accept that I do not know what I am all the way. Therefore, I will bring all of my attention inside to see what I am. And if things come up that block me from seeing, I will put all of my attention on that to see what it is. So with that strong feeling of purpose, I turned inside to meditate, and guess what happened? Well, with my first fresh attempt, I did make contact with awareness rather strongly. And for all the non-dualists out there, I recognize that those are not precisely accurate words. It might be more accurate to say that my attention merged into the background of awareness. But let's not get too hung up on words here. I'm trying to speak to a wide audience in this video, so I might not use technically precise and accurate language. So anyway, I felt an initial merging of my attention into awareness that was quite powerful, but then I was pushed back out of that merging like a fish spitting out a pebble it mistakenly thought was food. Then when I tried to go back in, so to speak, I suddenly felt a wave of foggy numbness descend over my head, almost like someone had just thrown a fuzzy blanket over me. The fogginess I was feeling felt somewhat pleasant, and I was tempted to just flow with it and drift around in that state of pleasant fuzzy-headedness. And that's where I brought the internal family systems technique into the picture. Instead of battling against the fogginess like a good yogi, or just drifting along with it like a lazy meditator, I turned directly towards that fogginess and welcomed it in the style of an IFS session. I literally spoke to it. "Hello, foggy feeling. How are you doing today?" I then focused my attention on that feeling of fogginess with as much clarity as I could muster, and I waited for it to respond. I didn't hear a response initially, so I greeted that foggy feeling a few more times in a friendly, welcoming way, and I asked how it was trying to help us by inserting that foggy feeling in between my attention and my greater awareness. For those of you who are newer to IFS, the assumption we make about any internal part is that there's a positive intention behind what they're doing, even if it appears superficially to be blocking us or harming us in some way. It took some determined tunneling of my attention and some repeated requests for this foggy part to speak with me before I finally made contact with it, and what I saw was quite unexpected. I saw an internal part, like a little independent being inside of my own mind, that looked extremely physically deformed. It seemed to have only one eye, and its nose and mouth seemed grotesquely twisted and misshapen in a really severe way. As usual, when looking inside, I wasn't able to see it with crystal clarity, but I was able to form a low-resolution image of it in my mind. In response to my curiosity, I saw this deformed being cringing and hiding, sort of like Gollum in the Lord of the Rings movies. And as I observed it, I saw images of it hiding from a bright sun over its head, as if the sunlight was burning its skin. I sensed that the sun was terrifying to this deformed being, and the light from the sun felt harsh and burning, as if the sun was a cruel enemy that must be avoided at all costs. As I looked at this poor deformed being, writhing and cursing, snuffling through its deformed nose like an asthmatic pug dog, holding up its arms in terror to block the light from the sun, I wondered whether it might be what IFS calls an unattached burden, or an external spiritual entity that has attached itself to my internal system to cause mischief to me. I really wasn't sure of its origin, whether it was a part of me or not, but I decided to respond to this poor being with love and compassion no matter what. And that is a response to unattached burdens that is growing stronger in me the more I study and learn about them. At the end of the day, from the highest spiritual perspective, all beings are a part of me. Whether angel, devil, God, demigod, human, alien, animal, plant, or other categories unknown to us, all beings are inside of me, are parts of me. Not the me as an ego, but the greater me, as that universal consciousness which I have experienced myself to be, and which I believe is also your truest and highest nature, when all veils have been removed from our eyes. In my heart of hearts, I recognize the unity of all life, and from that place of unity, I didn't care whether this poor snuffling Gollum was a part of me or not. I decided to approach it with love and compassion in either case. And as I looked closer at it, I saw a living being that had been rejected by all around him, perhaps tens of thousands of times, because of the extreme physical deformities of his face and body. He reminded me of Joseph Merrick, the Englishman with extreme deformities, who was put on exhibit in circus freak shows and called the Elephant Man. This being inside of me somehow seemed to have had a similar personal history of constant ridicule, shaming, and rejection. And I wondered whether it might be a part of me from a past life when I was incarnated into such a body. Perhaps it was, but I don't really know, and it doesn't really matter at this point, because I can work with it the same way whether it is or not. I could also sense that beneath this outer appearance, there was a tender, sensitive spirit who had been emotionally abused to such an extreme level that it broke my heart to see the depth of his suffering. I welcomed this wounded part and saw that it was deeply terrified of being seen. And that is why it was so afraid of my path of meditation and enlightenment, where I am turning towards the source of all seeing, the light of total awareness. That is why it had thrown a net of fuzzy-headed fogginess over my head, because it didn't want to be seen. Being seen feels both dangerous and painful to it, because of how much rejection it has experienced in the past, with each rejection feeling like another lash from a whip. I began talking to this part soothingly, telling it I was so sorry it had been rejected, so sorry it had been told it was disgusting, so sorry that sunlight felt dangerous to it, so sorry it was so alone and afraid. And when I said all of this, hot tears came into my eyes that burned intensely. I told it I understood why it didn't want me to go into the light, that it made sense, and I told it that God could wait. God could wait for it, this very least of beings, until it felt ready for me to go there. And with those words, God can wait, a new burst of tears sprang into my eyes. That phrase, in which I was putting this very last of beings ahead of the very first of beings, meant so much to it. And I could feel that there was an alchemical healing taking place inside of me as I showered this neglected being with love and honoring. And that's about when I noticed another feeling inside of my body of wanting to hurry up and finish processing with this deformed being so I could get back to meditating and get back to entering into a higher level of awareness. I suddenly saw that there was a part of me that wanted to finish quickly and keep the forward momentum going. So once again, using the IFS model, I welcomed this new internal part that wanted me to rush ahead. And right away, I perceived a very different part. This one was glowing and vibrant and smiling. I called him Bliss Bunny because of how happy and eager and spiritual he seemed to be. I welcomed Bliss Bunny and asked him how he was doing and how he wanted to help. Bliss Bunny told me that he wanted me to hurry up and enter into awareness and get enlightened because the opportunity was available now to do that, but might not be available later. He showed me an image of a massive kaleidoscope in which a doorway had appeared. But the kaleidoscope would continue to shift and move, and that doorway would close back up again. Bliss Bunny wanted me to jump through that door while it was still there. He said he didn't know when another opportunity like that might arise. And so I asked Bliss Bunny how he felt about the deformed part I was working with, and he said he was concerned that it would never be ready to enter the light, that it would only keep delaying us until it was too late and that opportunity was gone. That's when I began to see that Bliss Bunny, despite appearing so vibrant, joyful, and spiritual on the outside, was actually carrying a wound. I saw that he lived almost exclusively in images of the future, where he imagined himself being enlightened and permanently blissful. Despite his great optimism, Bliss Bunny couldn't tolerate the present moment very well. He was always rushing to get out of it because, truth be told, he felt empty inside. As I looked deeper, I saw that he felt stifled, suffocated, bored to death by the wider society that he was living in, and he wanted to escape it at all costs. His feeling of inner emptiness made him permanently restless and wanting to rush ahead into the future. So I took some moments to just sense into that painful restlessness and witness it deeply, offering my compassion and understanding to Bliss Bunny. Then I explained to him that if we try to enter enlightenment without dealing with these parts that did not want enlightenment, then those parts would only drag us back out of enlightenment later. And I asked Bliss Bunny to consider how many times this had already happened in this life of mine. The answer was hundreds of times. I explained a principle of IFS to Bliss Bunny that slow is fast. If we can deal with all the parts that resist enlightenment, although this might take some time, the results will be worth it because we won't have those parts pulling us in the opposite direction later, undoing our progress. I asked Bliss Bunny if he was willing to step aside while I dealt with these other parts that resist enlightenment in consideration of what I just said, and Bliss Bunny told me that he would give me the space to do that. But in exchange, he wanted me to promise that I actually would focus on that every day and actually do it. I saw that he was concerned that I would let that resolve slip away from me, as has happened many times in the past. I reflected to Bliss Bunny that it was a valid concern, and then I had to think about that commitment for a few moments to consider whether I could truly make that promise to him. In the end, I decided that I could and that it would be very beneficial. I promised that I would, and Bliss Bunny was satisfied, and he resolved, in turn, to step back and give me space to work with parts that were resisting meditation. At that point, I needed to end the meditation to carry on with my day, with the understanding that the investigation would continue the next day and the next, and so on. Before finishing, I want to mention that I saw in both of these parts, Bliss Bunny and the deformed one who I called Foggy, I saw tremendously powerful allies, potentially, if I can strengthen my bridge of healthy connection to them and begin integrating them into my conscious awareness. I could see that Bliss Bunny brings a lot of drive and motivation for me to do spiritual inquiry. And I could sense in Foggy an absolutely amazing richness of experience. Somehow, the intense pressure of suffering he has gone through has created many diamonds out of coal. He carries so much understanding about the least of us, the outcast, the rejected, the last in line. And it is exactly that arena where the most powerful healing takes place. After all, it's not the enlightened that need enlightenment. It is the wounded, the forgotten, the ones who carry on in darkness that need it. So I'm so excited to meet Foggy and to continue developing my connection with him by showing him love, compassion, and complete acceptance. In closing, I hope this provides an example of how seekers of enlightenment might begin working with their internal parts that resist our desire to merge our apparently limited awareness into the greater awareness that we truly are. If this gets you thinking and exploring along similar lines, I hope it brings great benefits to your search.